Security Now Illustrated by AskMisterWizard.com, illustrating concepts, mechanisms, and algorithms from the amazing Security Now podcast by Steve Gibson and Leo LaPorte. This is episode 10, Open Wi-Fi Access, segment B, at the coffee shop. Leo introduced this segment. If I go to a coffee shop, airport, or hotel with free Wi-Fi, they don't turn on encryption. They must operate in the clear or nobody can log on, right?
Well, that's exactly right. And again, it's really important to keep that in mind, that if you're using an open access point, you really need to think of it in terms of everyone in the coffee shop, for example, is clustered around behind you looking at your screen. I mean, they're not actually looking at your screen electronically, but they're seeing the mail you're sending, they're seeing the mail you're receiving.
Leo observed two different but related issues here. One, the bad guys can see what you're doing, and two, they could hack into your computer.
Well, I'm hoping that anyone who's concerned with security has taken the measure already of running a local personal firewall. This is another good reason why, even if you've got a NAT router at home that you know is going to be protecting you from external intrusion into your network, you still really want to be running a firewall on your machine. That's going to be there carried around on your machine, and it's going to keep people from getting into it in any simple fashion, even though they are basically in a shared wireless mode.
So what do you do when you go to a wireless access point? You can't force them to turn on WPA. How do you protect yourself?
There are really only a couple ways. If you were at an open wireless access point accessing your corporate network, most likely you're in a mode where, in order to dial in or connect into a remote corporate network, you're going to be running over a VPN in order to establish an extremely strongly encrypted connection between your machine and the remote network. Essentially, you're participating in that remote network, sort of extending your corporate network across the internet through the air to your table in the coffee shop, and making your remotely connected machine very much secure, as if it were sitting inside of the corporate firewall on the corporate network.
Leo observed that for people who don't have a corporate VPN, there are private VPN service companies.
Yes, exactly. The next step is to use some sort of a proxying service that is offering you a secure tunnel on purpose. You've mentioned the one that you have some appliance for.
Yeah, I use iPhantom. Now, you'd have to carry that around with you. I don't know how practical that is, but that does that because it establishes an SSL link with their servers.
Yes,
there's also companies.
Also, Anonymizer.com.
Anonymizer does it, and that's
and they explicitly offer exactly what we're talking about, an encrypted tunnel is what this is called, an encrypted tunneling service where you would run some client software on your side. Basically, you're using the wireless connection to get your machine on the internet. Then you're creating an encrypted tunnel connection between your machine, client software running on your side, and this service, for example, the Anonymizer secure tunneling service, so that your traffic is encrypted through the air across the internet to Anonymizer.com, where it is then decrypted in order to then transit from their location out over the internet, just as you normally would if you were at home or in a corporate environment or wherever else. The point being that the vulnerable segment, where you're going over the air from your computer to the coffee shop or airport access point, that's encrypted. It's also encrypted all the way to where it gets to Anonymizer, so you're safe against, for example, employees at the access point who might be able to sniff your traffic as well.
I want to mention two other products that do the same thing. One is very inexpensive. It's called Hotspot VPN. And it uses SSL, which is kind of nice. It's because most of the time SSL ports are wide open. You don't have to talk to the coffee shop to say, hey, please pass my VPN traffic. Because not all routers will do that automatically. That's the setting in the router. So since it's SSL, you can pretty much guarantee you'll be able to do that. And then there's another one called publicvpn.com. And same idea. You subscribe, and then you log into their servers, and they protect you.
Well, in fact, what's really interesting, Leo, is even if you were to use encryption, that is, if you were to use first-generation web encryption, typically everybody on the access point has the same key. So even if it's encrypted, if you're using web encryption, you still don't have any protection. Generally, an access point has a single key. Everything connecting to it has the same key, and it encrypts it. But it means that, again, sniffing the traffic, it can trivially be decrypted if you're using WEP-style encryption, which is another reason WEP is really bad, and WPA is a much better solution if you have a choice. I'll mention one scenario for the home user that's useful because it's simple and free, and that is if your access point is not part of your cable modem or your main router, but you've got a separate access point, like a freestanding little radio that you plug in to your router. If that's a switch as opposed to a hub, as most of these routers are, then your traffic on your wired network is not going to be seen by the wireless network. That switch gives you some isolation. And so there are ways that you could, if you really wanted to run an open wireless access point for your neighborhood, for example, there are ways that it could be done securely, but you really need to give it some thought.
The original audio-only version of this podcast can be found on the Gibson Research Corporation site at grc.com/securitynow. This clip illustrates some of the highlights from that show. This video clip comes from a large collection of related clips. All are indexed and easy to find at www.askmisterwizard.com, along with related items, text articles, illustrations, and forums. Please visit us today. We appreciate your support. Thank you.